We're always looking for ways to help you win your fantasy football league, and this week we're going to give you players to exploit and to avoid when you're setting your lineups. And Mike, let's first talk about players to exploit. There's a quarterback in Cincinnati, Andy Dalton, who had a pretty good game in week 2, and you think he's a good player to start in week 3.
It's just a great matchup for him. Again, Washington's defense allowing more than 300 yards per game through the air. And Cincinnati's defense is really struggling. This could be a game where a lot of points are scored, and I think Dalton is someone in bigger one-quarterback leagues, two-quarterback formats certainly, but he's a guy that's moving up the board, I think, because of matchups and because of the way that offense has played thus far.
Yeah, Andy Dalton had a tough first week against Baltimore, but definitely turned it on against the Cleveland defense. It's not too bad. And you look at running backs now, Donald Brown for Indianapolis. Obviously, when you look at the Colts, everyone talks about Andrew Luck, and for good reason. But Donald Brown is finally starting to show why the Colts wanted him to be their future back.
Another great matchup this week. The Jaguars giving up 5 rushing touchdowns this year. They're struggling. Maybe this is a game they fall behind. If you like Indianapolis this week, you've got to like Donald Brown. The matchup points.
Now we're going to some players to avoid. Maybe keep these guys on your bench this week. Falcons running back Michael Turner hasn't rushed for many yards, got in trouble with the law after the win on Monday night. He's a guy that you think fantasy owners should avoid.
You know, he's someone that if you're in bigger leagues, you probably don't have a choice. You have to start him. But let's suppose you've drafted C.J. Spiller. You've drafted very well at the position. I think you're at the point now where you can kind of play Turner on matchups, and this is not a good one for him. You know, San Diego allowing about 2.8 yards per carry. They've played very well thus far, and Turner is just off to a slow start. You know, 74 rushing yards on 28 carries in 2 games. It's not what you want to see thus far. Maybe you take a wait-and-see approach if you can do it. Again, I know some fantasy owners just aren't going to have that luxury, but if you do, maybe you sit them this week.
That Falcons offense now a throw-first offense. Usually they have been run-first with Michael Turner in past years. And our last guy to maybe avoid this week, Ben Tate for the Houston Texans. A guy I categorize as a very infuriating fantasy player. I had him on my bench for good reason. Of course, he rushes for 2 touchdowns. But this week, you think he can stay on my bench against the Denver defense?
It's the conundrum of having a Ben Tate. You don't start him in the weeks he plays well because Arian Foster is there, so you don't want to play him too much. Then he has 2 touchdowns. Certainly, we're going to ask a lot about him this week. Do I start him now? Denver's defense is very good. You always start Arian Foster. You don't bench him if he's going. But Tate is a guy that if you have other options, you don't play him. Now, again, in bigger leagues, maybe you don't have that sort of decision. But I think if you're in smaller leagues, you saw him score 2 touchdowns, there's nothing you can do about it. Turn the page, move on to week 3.
Yeah, in all my years of fantasy football, Mike, I've come to the conclusion if I don't know what to do with the guy, he's always going to do the opposite of what I expect. Yeah. So when I leave Ben Tate on my bench, as you suggested, he's of course going to rush for 4 touchdowns this week. To see the rest of the players Mike suggests you should exploit or avoid in fantasy football this week, head to our website at profootballweekly.com.